I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. For this Valentine's Day weekend, the backstory on the most wholesome corner of Facebook, Buy Nothing groups, where thousands of people give away and ask for gifts and services, furniture, clothes, or a ride home from the doctor, saving money and the environment. Just a week ago, we got 4 dining chairs and gave away 4 old ones that we had previously gotten on Buy Nothing. When I ran short of potatoes on Thanksgiving Day, Buy Nothing came to the rescue. When you offer something in a Buy Nothing group, you indicate the size of your gift with a banana. How did the banana become the new measure of size? As they say on Buy Nothing, I'm interested. We've changed the format of the show. After 3 years of weekly hour-long episodes, we have broken up the news and feature interview segments into 2 separate episodes. The news episode, call it I Hate the News, will drop on Tuesdays, and the feature interview on Friday mornings as usual. Shorter, more focused, to fit your busy life. Let us know what you think about the change. This is the feature interview episode with 2 veteran Buy Nothing group administrators or admins from the Washington, D.C. region. S.J. Ikle Khalsa is one of the admins of the original Tacoma Park Buy Nothing group, which faced trouble when it tried to break into smaller, more manageable groups, a process known as sprouting. And Lisa Silverman, one of the first DC area Buy Nothing admins, really an admin's admin, whose group isn't even called Buy Nothing anymore, but Community Gifting Southeast Silver Spring. The Buy Nothing project started on Bainbridge Island in Washington State in 2013 and quickly spread globally as a phenomenon of new neighborliness. Just as the internet was supposedly killing social capital, Buy Nothing became the missing link connecting our expanding digital world with real life. The pandemic lockdowns helped Buy Nothing groups coalesce and grow, and they brought new challenges. The original founders moved away from Facebook, concerned about the exclusiveness of the neighborhood groups, and now offer a separate mobile app where users can choose the pickup radius they want to be part of instead of being forced into pre-existing neighborhood boundaries, which in the older suburbs especially still show the vestiges of housing segregation. Now, Buy Nothing groups on Facebook exist on their own. Some have even changed their name, like Lisa Silverman's. Stay with us. I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are dirty, messy, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from the Fugazi-inspired Washington, D.C. garage punk band Apollo 66. Travis Hodges on guitars and vocals, Alex Morse on bass and vocals, Sean Henderson on drums, and Chris Morse on the tambourine. You can find them at apollo66rock.com. Lisa Silverman, S.J. Ikle Khalsa, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Anil. Long-time listener, first-time guest.
Well, thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. Can you explain what the Buy Nothing idea is?
Yeah, so the Buy Nothing idea really is about community gifting, sharing resources, and the mindset of there's enough in our communities that people can ask and they can get, and people can give, and not everything has to go into a wasteland. It's about saying, I have this and I don't need it anymore, but somebody who lives ideally within walking distance of me might need it. Or, oh, shoot, I only need a teaspoon of this one particular spice. Does somebody have it? And can they save me a trip to the grocery store so I don't have to buy it? And so I don't have to buy more than what I need. It's really the concept of going and walking down the street to get a cup of sugar from your neighbor. And I love it. I grew up in a neighborhood like that where my mom would give me the measuring cup and say, go to Mrs. Cook and ask her for a cup of sugar or ask her for an egg. For me, this is personal. It feels like home. So it's about giving, and it's more than anything, it's about abundance. And it's not about living in a community of scarcity. It's about living in a community where there is enough to go around and we're not fighting for resources.
SJ, what has been your involvement with Buy Nothing?
I became a member, I think, in early 2019 of my local Buy Nothing group in Tacoma Park, which had been started maybe a year before. And I was surprised I hadn't joined it already because it lines up with the community aspects and environmental resource conservation and efficiency that I appreciate. And I grew up on a Sikh ashram, which had a number of community aspects. We didn't borrow eggs from each other since we were completely vegetarian, but we shared a lot of resources, and the community was strong, and I was glad to become a member, and then about a year later, an admin of that group. And then subsequent to that, we went through our typical Buy Nothing promoted sprouting process where you have a large group and it evolves into a smaller group, a more community-based group that's still manageable. As it's growing, it becomes smaller and more intimate. So that's the beginning of my Buy Nothing story.
So I became a member, I want to say late 2018, early 2019. My timeline aligns with SJ's pretty closely. I became an admin on my 40th birthday in 2019. What a great kind of like treat to yourself. So I've been an admin for about 4.5 years. In 2020, the Silver Spring group sprouted into 3 groups. Silver Spring was sort of the foundation of the groups in the Montgomery County area, and kind of other groups, including the Tacoma Park big group and the Tacoma Park smaller groups grew from there. In 2020, I decided to take on the DC Metro admins and created that group. And in 2021, I worked with some others to do a more global group. That global group sprouted a little bit out of the Buy Nothing project, moving on in sort of some different directions. So Buy Nothing had always been run by Facebook groups starting about 2011 or so, 2010. And around 2020, the founders of the project said, we're going to create an app for this. But Facebook groups can continue. They didn't say get rid of them. There were so many of them, thousands of them across the world. So some of us said, look, we need a group for those of us who are sticking with like the old school principles of Buy Nothing. So I did that for about a year. And now I love my local group where we are actually now community gifting in Southeast Silver Spring, Maryland. We are still happy to be part of the community gifting movement, the helping your neighbors, but we are no longer affiliated in any way with the Buy Nothing project as it was.
This cup of sugar idea, getting a cup of sugar, right? It's sort of it's a neighborhood principle. In the past, we didn't need to have a group to be able to get a cup of sugar. But now it seems that in order to get a cup of sugar, we need some level of formality, right? And that seems a sort of change in our thinking about community. That's kind of,
I think it's sad where we've gotten to, but I think that's the truth. And I think people's lives have gone more onto social media. And then I think the pandemic didn't do us any favors. In Maryland, the pandemic, we kept us safe, which was really great. For a long period of time, we know Maryland had lower rates of COVID. Montgomery County had higher rates of vaccination. Our mask mandates were longer. But people were more isolated. So a social media platform was a way to stay engaged and a way to stay connected.
I'll agree with that. I think it preceded pandemic as well. We had people being not so much in their yards, more in their house, whether it was just on TV or internet. I know when I first moved to my neighborhood 20 years ago, we instigated neighborhood progressive potlucks and yard sales, and we started a little listserv, which ironically connected us a little bit more because we didn't have one for our little couple blocks. And I think it's, as we got more into our devices, the way to connect with people was through our devices. And Buy Nothing helped bring back some of the local connections.
And what I love about community gifting, at least in our group, a lot of people will share why they want an item. Like my daughter's favorite color is purple. She would love that purple mug. Or those cardboard boxes that are going to waste. Oh, wait, we're taking a group of Boy Scouts camping and they're doing cardboard camping. So you at least get to learn a little bit more about the why behind a gift being given or received.
both of you talked about this idea of sprouting. So, which is a technical term. All it means is that a Buy Nothing group becomes big and then it breaks up into smaller groups in order to be more manageable. So traditionally, Buy Nothing founders, they had a manual for doing this, right? Some rules for it. What were those rules and how have they changed over time?
Buy Nothing initially ran into problems, and they found this solution, which is called sprouting. And then they directed and mandated that groups do this. And then they got some pushback that was too heavy-handed, and that was causing communities to do stuff they didn't want to do. So they pulled that back a little bit. But that story that how they messed up and were too dictatorial in their precepts was a history that carried through, and some people were kind of resented that they had to follow the rules. And I think that contributed to people don't like to sprout anyway. Even when it's done really well, it's still painful, and you might technically lose a friend who's in another group at a different part of the sprout map that is created. So I think that initial history of heavy-handedness carried through, even though there was some backtracking and said, let's do this a better way. Let's let the admins have a little more say. Let's look at racial and economic impacts of sprouting and see if you can mitigate those. And maybe you do sprout a different way than they did initially. So
I've only been through one sprout, but we know that there's sort of a sweet spot among group size. I like to think of that sweet spot as somewhere between like 800 and 1,000 people or so. Because people still know each other, you still have what you need in a community, but it's not quite so big that it becomes this like, I want that gift and I can be over there in an hour.
So is it both your understanding that sprouting is seen negatively?
I'll say that all sprouts, or all that I've heard and tracked, and have tension, and you can manage that better, or you can have a more of an explosion, a splitting, a splintering. It can come out badly.
Yeah, I will say that when Silver Spring sprouted in January of 2020, it was smooth and people found their new groups. But we had those tools from the Buy Nothing project of how do you do it. We did a week of thanks beforehand. We made sure that the new admins were all trained the same way as the current admins. So those sprouted groups, it turned out that when we sprouted, the three of us admins who were adminning the larger Silver Spring group all wound up in the same neighborhood group. But we made sure that we stayed in touch with the new admins. We're still in touch with the new admins 4 years later. The Silver Spring admin, Silver Spring Four Corners area admins, we have a running group chat just to make sure things are running smoothly. Hey, did you get 2 requests from this person? We see they're in your group, or we've got somebody moving to your neighborhood or whatever. It doesn't have to be painful. Like SJ said, it can be done carefully and kindly. And there's certain people who don't like change. There's certain people who really struggle. And depending on where you are in life, who knows what else in your life has changed? Have you just had a kid? Have you just changed jobs? Did you just move to the neighborhood? All of those things compound a person's experience, right? But within about 2 months or so, we found the groups were thriving. The smaller groups were thriving. Our group started as the smallest. We were about 230 some members when we sprouted. The other groups were more in the mid threes. And we now have 980 members or so like that in this one corner of Silver Spring.
It seems like you've had very different experiences. Lisa, you had a very smooth experience. But on the other hand, SJ has actually, I think, in Takoma Park, has had more challenging experience with the sprouting process.
Yeah, so we did as well, only did one sprout. And I think our timeline is just about a year after Lisa. And Lisa was able to get her sprout completed, I think, right before pandemic. So that probably helped a little. We were getting ready to sprout around that time. We probably weren't ready to do it quite as early as January 2020, maybe May. And we definitely delayed it because of the pandemic. We had different rules. We said, are we going to allow essential items only? So our drama happened despite us having made many posts over the upcoming year saying, hey, we're thinking about sprouting. We want to do a poll. Where are the people? We made our new maps. We consulted some census data on housing types, economic income types, diversity, ethnic diversity. And we thought our maps were pretty good. And we went through a couple iterations with our group of newly trained admins. So we had ended up with 3 existing admins and 3 new admins and 2 in each new group. We're going to go for a 3-way sprout. We'd considered a 4-way and a 2-way sprout as well. But the numbers seemed like that was going to be good. So we were at the point of announcing our sprout, we were getting the typical pushback of this is going to split the community and what's the problem. And then there was like a backlash against the admins. They were being too heavy-handed. They chose the maps were bad, and you're going to reinforce racial and economic divides. And it was a pretty heavy slam. And, I felt, we were in the defensive position of trying to say what we had all done and review stuff.
So when the admins decided what the boundaries were going to be, it was mainly an admin decision, the group of you making that decision. I mean, is there any way, maybe Lisa can weigh in on this. Is there any way for admins to consult more broadly, to be able to have more, what is the government called stakeholder participation?
We go to the census data, and the census data is the federal piece that is done every 10 years. And what we get from that is it's so not perfect. No data collection is ever going to be perfect. Let's just be real there. But it's at least a baseline that's understood across the board. We also know there's some equity issues with the census. We know that certain people may not want to participate depending on immigration status, things like that, who's living in the house. You may not want to answer how many people are living in the house if you're not comfortable there. Let's also put that in as a factor here in, I can speak to the Silver Spring, and SJ can speak to the Tacoma Park community too, where that might be a little bit of a bigger issue than it might be in some other communities in different parts of the country. But at least it's a starting point, and at least you're asking the members. And sometimes members will say that doesn't make sense, and you do get to parse it out. This is why it's not rush. You get to get that feedback and see, okay, wait, what if we tweak this? For us, one of the little things that we tweaked, we were originally going to divide at Dale Drive in Silver Spring. And then we were like, well, wait a second. What about dividing at Sligo Creek instead? And it's that little thing that Dale Drive and Sligo Creek are a quarter of a mile away from each other, one hill, right? But that made such a difference for us.
What is that difference?
It's interesting when groups split where they divide. And it's like, I can easily get across Dale without having to go around, but I can't get across Sligo Creek. Sligo Creek is much harder to get around because I have to cross a body of water, and there are limited number of places where one can do that.
So it's almost as if there is a physical impediment, right?
Yeah.
So it's like countries have borders and rivers.
Yes.
That kind of thing?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Now, SJ, the kind of things that Lisa's talking about, did that not happen in Tacoma Park?
I think we followed the playbook, and we did the census data, and we did the communications. We might have more economic diversity, like a wider range, more ethnic diversity.
We had one pain point in our sprout, and we had really involved members, and somebody said to us, I won't cross University. I don't want to go on that side. There are gangs on that side. And without admins even stepping in, about 10 members of our group called this person out and said, that language doesn't belong here. We do not support that concept. No. And we said to the person, then you don't have to join your new group. That's it. Like, this is it. And then that person came back a couple months later and asked to join the group. And it was like, do we let this person in?
Did you?
The Buy Nothing concept actually believes in second and third and fourth chances and coaching. We did let the person in. The person is not super active in the group, but we let the person in, and we said, with the understanding that if there's one incident of this, we do not welcome you back.
So now that was a fairly easy case. Somebody that brings up, gangs is kind of, is not very far from dog whistling. But University is really hard to cross.
It is really hard to cross.
Right. And I'm not recommending anybody walk across.
No, the four corners and the four corners and the Wheaton groups are divided at University. We're just not divided because Franklin Knowles isn't that big and that active. But you go on the other side of Blair High School, it's divided at University. That's the really smart thing to do because it's not only that. I mean, it's hard to cross, and at times it can be dangerous to cross too. So like, what is the safest way as well?
But Buy Nothing itself has actually allowed bigger and bigger, wider driving areas within groups, right? As Buy Nothing itself has progressed to a different format.
So the Buy Nothing project decided to invest their resources in the Buy Nothing app, which anybody can access, right? Cool. You don't have to use Facebook. There are certain people who do not use Facebook. On the other hand, you put in a radius of how far you're willing to go. So I'm sitting here over by sort of between Eastern Middle School and Blair High School, right? That corner of Silver Spring. If I put in that I'm willing to go 5 miles, it might take me to somewhere in Northeast DC, or it might take me somewhere over in Wheaton and Aspen Hill. Do I actually know my neighbors at that point? No, there's really kind of minimal.
I agree with her. I mean, obviously, Buy Nothing was created exactly along the lines that you were thinking. The entire sprouting process that they had created, right? Answered the questions that you are bringing up, and yet there was sufficient reason for the project, for the people that originated the project, to move away from the original idea, right? And part of that, if I am correct, if I have read correctly, has to do with you know how we construct our neighborhoods, and whether the neighborhoods themselves are constructed in racially exclusive ways, such that the Buy Nothing project has to be different and allow different radii of operation for each group in order to overcome the structural condition of housing segregation.
The other side of that is, does the creation of those groups create your community and create your neighbors for you in an area where it's so much harder to do that?
It is a dilemma. It is not an easily solved issue. I think the question I have for you now, Lisa, is that how close are you to sprouting again?
That's a really difficult conversation to have about, where do we split? Do we split at university? Well, Forest Knolls doesn't have quite as much participation. Do we wait until that side of the group? So, where do we go? And I'm constantly looking at this and thinking, when do we have to sprout? And I'm watching for those triggers that show it's time to sprout. Things like missed pickups.
In Takoma Park, SJ, what are some similar lines that you had to wrestle with? Because fundamentally, the pushback you got was over the boundaries.
I think it was more on that we were splitting the group and denying people from one side of town to exchange with people on the other side of town. So the typical model is you sprout and then you join your local group, and you don't have that connection that you loved with so and so across town, but you're encouraged, of course, to be personal friends with them person.
I wanted to ask you, at some point you had said that there are good admins and there are bad admins. And one of the measures of being a bad admin is that you're spending too much time policing your group. Okay, so there's a balance here too, right? You have to police your group. There is no way not to, right? You want to get rid of, sort of things that are normally on Nextdoor and you don't want in Buy Nothing. But on the other hand, there is the idea that you are saying, if you're policing too much, you haven't done the right preparatory work, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think there really is a balance. Like, if you police, and I'm gonna not use the word police, I'm gonna use the word monitor if you're constantly checking, for all of like the like little things, you're spending just way too much time on it, and you're becoming more of the like in charge as opposed to less of a building community.
If we model the things we want and think carefully about it, we're going to create the micro society of the Buy Nothing community that we'd really like to be how it is all around.
Among the best gifts I have seen recently is a gift that a retired school teacher offered to young parents, that I will come fold 2 loads of laundry, or I will look after your kids for a couple of hours so that you can do what you need to do. And really, that's what makes me just melt every time I see it. It is, like you said, the most wholesome corner of Facebook. Do you see places where there are no Buy Nothing groups?
We don't have a Buy Nothing group in Adelphi. And there was one that started and it didn't get traction. And the admin didn't want to do it anymore. And instead of coming to the rest of us in DC, Maryland, Silver Spring group and saying, can somebody else take over my group? She deleted the group. Well, that area of Langley Park, Adelphi, kind of like inside the beltway between College Park and Clifton Park Village or so, going down to University, there's no group there. And it's not super population dense. And my guess is most of the people who live in that neighborhood don't speak English as their first language. But yeah, we're missing, like, I'm looking at the map and you don't really have white space of the map around the DC area, unless there's just parks or government property, but you've got white space there. But I don't have white space at all going north until I get to at least Frederick.
Well, how about Buy Nothing Espanol?
I was going to suggest that if Lisa and I wanted to tackle this neighboring adjacent to both our communities white space, that one thing we would potentially do is try to solicit it as a Spanish language version.
There's a lot of material out there, but could we do it? Yeah.
SJ Icle-Khalsa, Lisa Silverman, thank you for taking the time to come on the show. I hope Buy Nothing keeps evolving.
Thank you, Sunil.
Thank you.
You're listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. I'll be back with the wrap-up and lessons from my conversation with Buy Nothing admins Lisa Silverman and SJ Icle-Khalsa.
What they say, close the door and I'm not ever gonna look back. Pack a bag, but only one. We're moving fast and we gotta run. There's a risk that you take when you jump off the track. This time tomorrow we can be gone. This time tomorrow.
What lessons should we draw from my conversation with local Buy Nothing group admins Lisa Silverman and SJ Icle-Khalsa? I want to start with Lisa's idea of abundance. Abundance can mean affluence, but it is not the same thing. Abundance comes not only from producing things, but also from sharing more. If we individually hoard less, we all have more. Is this sufficient to meet everything that everyone wants? That's never the case. But being able to give is perhaps the best psychological trigger to feeling satisfied, sufficient, and I'd say abundant. The fact that Buy Nothing on Facebook continues despite the centralized organization that supported them having migrated away speaks volumes for the idea itself. It is important to note that rules make communities work. Sometimes we forget that. Rules can be old, archaic, and sometimes plainly discriminatory, but no community succeeds without them. And a big part of the appeal of Buy Nothing comes from the volunteer work of people like Lisa Silverman and SJ Icle-Khalsa in making sure that the rules are followed. But their perspective is interesting. If admins are spending too much time enforcing rules, they are doing something wrong. Seems like a lesson for all of policing itself. We end with a shout out to the longtime former NPR Morning Edition host Bob Edwards, who together with Cokie Roberts first introduced me to the possibilities of radio news, which is the model I have tried to adapt in this podcast. Bob Edwards died February 9th, and I am thankful we lived in the same world. That's all for this episode of I Hate Politics, where we aim to stem the decline in local news by working with community voices. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, and assistant producers Daniel Galileo and Katarina Gasek, with support from University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program at the universities of Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home. Music for this episode comes from the Fugazi-inspired Washington, D.C. garage punk band, Apollo 66. Travis Hodges on guitars and vocals, Alex Morse on bass and vocals, Sean Henderson on drums, and Chris Morse on the tambourine. You can find them at apollo66rock.com. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. Don't miss I Hate the News next Tuesday.